Well, hello YouTube. How are you today? Looking beautiful as always. So, a couple months ago I decided to take my GoPro out for some cool action footage, doing a little shooting and setting off exploding targets. And it didn't go real great. I'm gonna put that footage right here for you to see.
It broke the glass for your GoPro! What? Oh!
Yep, the GoPro almost lost its life that day. It soldiered on and it's doing pretty well. But it got me to thinking, could I build a ballistic glass or something to keep the camera safe so that we could get the extreme shots and whatnot. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to build ballistic glass and a box to hold the glass and the camera so that we can do dumb stuff. You're welcome. Okay, bye. Okay, we're going to start this project off with a piece of 1/4 inch plate steel. This is what we're going to cut the pieces out of to make the box that the camera goes in. I wanted my box to be 4 inches deep, 4 inches tall, and 6 inches wide. So I used a paint marker to mark out the lines where I needed to cut with the plasma cutter. Keep in mind when you're building something like this, you want the box to be slightly larger than the camera you're going to use. That way you have a little bit of room to position the camera and make sure everything's going to be in focus and set up just the way you want it. For the base of the box, I went ahead and cut the piece of steel about 2 inches too wide. I used this as kind of a ledge to hold the glass in place once we got it built. Alright, we've got all the pieces cut out for the box. I'm just going to take the grinder and kind of smooth out the edges where I cut with the plasma cutter and take off any paint or oxidation that might get in the way when we go to weld. Now that everything's cleaned up, ready to weld this thing together, do yourself a favor and use some light tack welds to hold the box together before you get crazy and start putting huge welds on this thing. That way if there's something wrong with it, you can kind of take it apart. In the end, I wound up welding the inside and outside of the seams on this thing. I wanted it to be stout since we're going to be shooting at it. We're going to need some kind of brackets to hold the glass in place on the box. I wound up using some angle iron from an old bed frame to make a slot that the glass could drop into on the front of the box. What I found out worked best for me was to use narrower pieces of angle iron on the inside of the box to kind of brace the glass. That way it had something to recoil against when it got hit. And then I used the larger pieces of angle iron on the outside to hold the glass in place. Now that we've got these pieces cut to length and have ground the excess paint and whatnot off of them, they are ready to be welded in. Once again, you want to make sure you just kind of tack this stuff in there to start. That way you can adjust it if you need to. Now that I've got the pieces welded in that are going to support the back of the glass, we're ready to weld in the pieces that are going to actually act as the slot that will hold the glass in place. You want to make sure when you weld these in there that you are fairly square with them across the front. That way when you get that piece of glass in there, one of them isn't uneven and it doesn't let the glass drop into place properly. And just like the rest of the project, you want to weld both sides of the seams. That way this thing is really strong. We don't want it coming apart when we shoot at it. Alright, we've got those welded on there. Now what I'm doing is welding a steel pipe coupling to the bottom of the box. As you'll see later on in the project, that's what we're going to use to support this box. It will work really well for our stand because it'll allow us to thread different pieces of pipe into the bottom of this and change the height of our camera. And it should look kind of like this. At this point we're ready to build the door for the back of this box. I wanted to put a door on the back of it. That way if something happened and got spun around, it would have some protection against flying shrapnel or whatever may happen. I built the door for the box out of a piece of 1/8 inch plate. It's a little lighter than the rest of the steel we used, but it should do the job. I'm just going to use this heavy hinge to attach the door to the box. We're going to cut a little strip of metal. That way we can build a tab on the bottom of the box that'll go through the door. That way we can use a clasp to actually lock the door shut. Here I'm just using a die grinder to cut a slit in the bottom of the door. This is where the tab is going to poke through that we're going to use to lock the box. Okay, we've got that all cut to size, and we're ready to weld the door to the box. Once again, light tack welds to start, and then weld it like you mean it. I want to take a second right here to remind everybody to wear proper safety equipment. Gloves, hearing protection, eye protection, whatever is required to keep yourself safe. The door is installed. Now we're going to weld the little tab onto the bottom of the box that is going to act as part of the locking mechanism. I found that welding this tab in place with the door closed worked best. That way I knew that the tab was centered and in the right spot. Now we just want to make sure that the door opens and closes properly. Then we're going to drill a small hole in the tab on the outside of the door. This is where the little clasp will go that actually holds the door shut. Now that we've got the box put together, I just went ahead and cleaned mine up with a sanding wheel, then cleaned it up with a little bit of solvent and put a little bit of paint on it. I went with orange to make sure that it was nice and visible. Didn't want anybody to accidentally shoot my box. Okay, the box is pretty much done, but we need to build the stand that the box is going to sit on. I built this out of lumber to try to save on weight. It shouldn't be taking any severe impact, so scrap wood or whatever you got laying around should do the job for this. The main thing to note here is that I'm going to attach a threaded pipe flange to the top of the stand. Once again, we're going to be able to thread different lengths of pipe into this thing to change the height of the camera. In the end, the camera box and stand should look about like this, with the different pipes to adjust the height. Alright, now that we've got the box and whatnot built, we're ready to move on to the more interesting part of this project, building the ballistic glass. I'm going to start off with a sheet of acrylic and a sheet of polycarbonate, and I'm just going to cut them to the size that I want to fit into the box. I kind of learned the hard way that you wanted to use a coarser saw to cut this material. Using something with fine teeth tended to just melt the acrylics or the poly and make a mess of things. I found that a skill saw worked really well for the larger cuts, and when I got down to trimming the smaller stuff, just a regular hand saw worked pretty well. You want to make sure that you brace either side of the material with a piece of wood or something, that way it can't flex back and forth. This is especially important with the acrylic. It will shatter. The poly is pretty tough and flexible, but the acrylic is not. Now that we've got the pieces cut to the proper size, we're ready to start laminating this all together. You want to clean your surfaces really well to make sure that your epoxies can stick to everything. You don't want to sand anything because that'll make your glass foggy. You just want to make sure that you use some glass cleaner or a clean rag and make sure that it is all wiped down. I'm using Gorilla Glue clear epoxy for this project. I found that it was pretty strong and did a pretty good job of holding the materials together. When you go to apply your epoxy, you want to kind of spread it over the surface of the material. That way it gets to the corners and whatnot, and definitely use a little more than you think is necessary. You want this stuff to squeeze out of the edges of your materials when you go to press them in the vise. So what I wound up doing is using 2 pieces of acrylic and 1 piece of polycarbonate and sandwiching them together with the poly in the middle. I wanted the acrylic on the outside because it is a little more scratch resistant than the polycarbonate. The poly tends to be pretty soft and scratches really easily. Then I just put it between 2 pieces of wood and squeezed it in the vise. That way the epoxy would flow out to the edges and we would get a nice even coat. Since the epoxy is still liquid at this stage, our materials can kind of move around. You want to take a second to get everything lined up, and then you want to clamp your vise down just as hard as you can. You really want to squeeze this stuff tight. Ta-da! Ballistic glass. This is only 3 layers thick, and you can go through and layer it as thick as you want by adding more layers in a similar fashion. I made most of mine 5 layers thick because I wanted it to stand up pretty well, but you can do however you need to. Whatever makes you happy with this, go ahead and do that. I want to take a second to point out that even the best ballistic glass isn't completely bulletproof. It's more of a bullet-resistant situation. That being said, this is not meant to protect anybody or save anybody's life. Don't stand in front of this and let people shoot at you or anything dumb like that. Perfect. And all we have to do is situate the camera inside the box, and we are ready to go and try this thing out. Okay, we shot the 22. And the glass is broken. I don't think it would take any more than that with the 3 layers. Now we're going to try the 5 layers, and we'll shoot it with the 40 with a full metal jacket and see what happens with that. Same kind of deal. It blew it all apart, which is what's supposed to dissipate the energy. The acrylic fails miserably. And it's supposed to shatter, but our poly holds up. Okay, so we're set up at about 50 yards, and buddy Andrew here is going to take a shot and see how we do with the 5 layers with the 7.62 by 39. It blew the acrylic apart, and it pierced the poly. I went through both of them, but if we had one more out there, we'd probably be able to stop it. It was full metal jacket, but if we went 7 plies thick instead of the 5, I think we would stop it. doesn't fit in my contraption, but to know that it'll stop 40 Smith & Wesson, I think we're good. We're going to start doing more entertaining stuff now.
Oh.
That was better. There you go. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I had a blast making it. Haha! Don't forget to take a second to subscribe, and if you're so inclined, you can follow me on Instagram. Link in the description. If you have any questions about this project, please leave them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. I'm John Can, and remember, if I can build it, so can you.